Why don't I introduce you?
Okay, I'm over here. Hello. Hello, ladies. Okay, if you would silence your electronic devices, please, we would appreciate it. Or tuck them away somewhere. I know they are ever present. Thanks, guys, for coming tonight. It's right before spring break. Half of your heads are not here, I know, but it's worthy for the other half. Aandrea Stang is a longtime friend and a professional contact in LA. She's done amazing work both at the MoCA Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles and at Occidental College, where she is now. And she's going to speak to you about her professional life and some of the projects she's worked on over the last few years. So I'm very happy that she's here, and she got a little weather and some snow.
Got some snow.
Yeah.
Snow is awesome.
So thank you guys, and welcome.
Hi, I'm Aandrea. So Nancy asked me to talk about what I do, and whenever anybody asks me what I do, I basically say, well, one of the things I do is do things like source 12,000 pounds of ice. And so, and that's not like, that's one of the things that I do, or that I have done. And I was trying to think when I was sort of thinking through what to talk to you guys about this afternoon, or this evening, and what is my job? And my job, a lot of the time, my job is trying really hard not to say no to people. And not in the like, I'm open to saying yes kind of spiritual kind of way. It's like people ask me crazy things, can I do this? And part of my job is to say, yeah, sure. And I actually, in between taking a walk and coming to dinner or going to dinner, I wrote down a list of crazy things people have asked me about, but I feel like maybe go forward with some of the slides and then we'll get to the good stuff. Can you go forward one, please? Okay, so this slide, so I've got a little bit of background stuff in here. Like this image is of a piece by Suzanne Lacey and Leslie Labowitz that they did in 1971 called In Mourning and in Rage. Read that. They did it in Los Angeles. It was a response to the Hillside Strangler murders that had happened at the time. And, so 1971, 15, 20 years later, I'm in college in Ohio, and I'm taking a modern contemporary art class, and I start learning about this piece. And it was really one of the things that really sort of made me really interested, because it was that thing of, art doesn't have to be an object on the wall. It can be something that means something politically, and it can also be something that happens performatively, and it can be something that happens. This was done as a press conference, and it was done specifically for the media. So, next please. Oh, wait, we can go back for one sec. See, this is why you don't want me to do this. So here we are, flash forward another 20 years or something, and the one interesting conversation that I've been able to have as a professional is I've been able to talk to Suzanne about the influence that she's had on me, and been able to develop a personal relationship with her, a professional relationship with her. And so while that's a whole nother talk, getting to meet your heroes, I mean, I could do that one too, but we're not going to do that one tonight, because it turns out everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. Now we can have the next slide. So I went to college in the 80s, and this is, and those of you who, well, most of you weren't alive in the 80s, but another big influence for me was the sort of iconic work that the art arm of ACT UP did, which they were called Grand Fury, and this is, of course, their Silence Equals Death sort of campaign that they did, which, for those of you who do not remember or couldn't remember, was ubiquitous, I would say, from the mid-'80s to the early '90s. okay, we can move forward. And then this is Women's Action Coalition was developed in, let's see, it came out of, again, for those of you who remember, and I'm sorry, but I'm talking about, this isn't a big art history class, but during the Clarence Thomas hearings for him to become the Supreme Court Justice that he is now, Associate Supreme Court Justice, I think, he was accused of sexually harassing.
Anita Hill.
Thank you very much.
She was on TV this morning.
Oh,
We have a documentary about her now. It's opening up on Friday.
timely. So as a result, this group, Women's Action Coalition, sort of started as in reaction to what was going on with the Anita Hill, with the hearings, because Anita Hill was really, it got turned back around, and she was made into the bad guy in a lot of people's minds. So the group started in the late, 90, it was before Clinton was elected, so it was like 90, 91. It started in New York. Ida Applebrug and a bunch of other artists started it. I got involved within San Francisco, and it had a huge impact on me. Again, like in Mourning and Enraged, while being incredibly infuriating, the flat management, consensus-based work that the group did has been really influential on me. Never mind that it made me want to kill people. I shouldn't say that. It was very frustrating to do consensus-based work. Okay, so before we go any further, if you guys have any questions, I talk fast. If I'm saying things that don't make sense, interrupt and ask questions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and so then I started working at MoCA. I mean, a lot of things happened, and then I started working at MoCA. And
I just realized how many people I know in that picture.
I would be surprised if you weren't in this picture. So I had this awesome job at MoCA. I mean, it was crazy, and there was a lot of things to dislike about it, but one of the nice things about this job was, to some degree, I got to create what happened in the job, and I did public programs, and I'm a person, while I'm very goal-oriented, as I was saying to the class that heard me talk this morning, I'm very bright, shiny object syndrome. I do not like doing the same thing over and over again. So I sort of make new challenges for myself on a regular basis, which is great and also really stupid. So in 2007, the MoCA put on a show called Whack Art and the Feminist Revolution, and I, had a long conversation with the curator for this. And so I'm going to back up for 2 seconds. So my job at MoCA was to do all the public programs. And so I worked with all of the curators to support the exhibitions that we had on view. So in some instances that meant hosting lectures like this, or sometimes there was a musical event, sometimes it was producing a play, sometimes it was sort of working with the artist to create a workshop. So there was a lot of different facets to my job. So you can see I really never did the same thing twice, which was really good for me, but also totally crazy making. But that being said, in 2007, I had this long conversation, it was probably the conversation happened in 2006, with the curator of the exhibition, and I said, okay, we have a show with 150 artists in it, most of whom are still alive. No, 110. How do we, and traditionally the museum had talks on the first day of the opening day of an exhibition, because any artist that was involved with the show would have been there the night before for the opening, so how do you take advantage of it? And I said, well, how do we do that when you've got 110 artists, probably 100 of whom at the time were still alive? So we did this crazy thing, and the curator was like, what do you want to do? I said, well, we should have them all talk. And she was like, that's great, figure out how you're going to do that. And so we walked around the museum for about 8 hours that day. with a soapbox and a microphone, and any artist that was involved with the show, and many people who had a relationship to the exhibition could come and could get on the soapbox, literally on the soapbox, and talk. The soapbox was there so that whoever was the speaker would be higher than everybody else because they were surrounded by about 200 people. So, and 200 people went on this walking tour of the museum for 7 hours, and the director of the museum could not believe I tricked all these people into doing that. But even in this picture, it's kind of a good group. I'm assuming Nancy's probably somewhere over here, but there's Yvonne Rayner, and anyway. So we can go ahead, because so that I put that slide in by way of sort of saying that was my on-ramp to doing weird stuff. I'd already been doing some interesting stuff, but I sort of felt more comfortable. In 2008, the museum put on this show called Alan Capro, Artist Life. It was a retrospective of Alan Capro's work, and the museum got a bunch of money to reinvent his happenings. And for those of you who didn't hear me talk about it this morning, happenings were sort of these, it was the first time that term was being used, and there were these sort of performances that involved these sort of interactions between people, and it became sort of this, it like had this very hippie connotation to it. But, and you can see here, this is a picture from an original Capro happening that happened probably in the late 60s, and it does look kind of hippie.
What exactly is happening there? I think Elle is laughing. She's like, what is that?
No, I just know way too much about it.
You know
What's
too much?
happening?
Well, I know about the happening,
Yeah.
the fluxes and stuff like that because of Nancy's stuff. So.
Oh, good. So, they're licking jam off the car. Yeah, they're licking jam off the car.
And what kind of, isn't that, it wasn't a beetle.
I think it was.
Yeah?
I'm not sure.
Mm.
And where did he live? Where were these happenings occurring?
So, Capro starts doing the happenings in New York in the late 50s, and then in the mid-60s he moves out to California and is part of the first group of faculty at CalArts, and starts to make his mark there as an educator, and then he goes on to UCSD and starts the art department in San Diego. So, more likely than not, California, although I can't say that for certain. Can you go ahead one slide? So this is his first happening. Oh, see, I could have just, maybe I should stand over there and know what's going on. Anyway, so this is the first happening that Capro does, and again, for those of you who heard me talk this morning, I apologize. 1959 is when the term gets coined, and this piece, 18 Happenings in 6 parts, was, again, for me, a really influential piece, although I was not born in 1959 and didn't see it, but as I started to learn about Capro's work, so there was a series of performances that happened, and you, by random chance, were given cards that said 1, 2, or 3. I think that was right. So you were given numbers, and maybe you got 2, 2, 1, maybe you got 3, 2, 1. So there were 3 acts, and each act you went into whatever number you had. And the acts were sort of approximately 7 minutes, and then in between time, there was a 15-minute intermission in between each act. So Capro was really interested in not so much what was going on, but the space in between where people were interacting with one another and people were saying, what the hell did I just see? That was weird. Did you see that? And the audience was seated all the way around in each of the rooms, so nobody was really seeing the same thing. So it was really a sort of discussion about different perspectives. So let's go forward and see what's next. Right. So back to the show that we did in 2008. we, over the course of the exhibition, we collaborated with 30 organizations to create 55, recreate 55 of Capro's happenings. Well, it wasn't actually 55. We did 55 events. It was about 40 happenings. A lot of people did a lot of them. So this is who we collaborated with, and we can go forward. And this is 18 happenings in 6 parts happening in 2008. It looks a little bit different than the picture you saw before, but this is an artist-dancer named Flora Wegman. And it was great to be able to collaborate with all of these people all over Los Angeles. It was actually quite an extraordinary experience. Going forward, see that here's more of it. I think that's, I'm going to say that's Skylar Hasker painting, but that doesn't, who cares? Again, as I was saying this morning, I apologize for repeating myself. For a show that Capro had in 1967 at the Pasadena Art Museum, which was at the time was the Norton Simon Art Museum, he was having a sort of mid-career retrospective, and one of the things that he had proposed was to do to create this structure, that structure, which was a series of ice blocks to create a room that had no windows or doors. And I can't read what the actual score says, but it says something as straightforward as that. And so this was the score for the piece, and he proposed to the museum that he do it in 12 different places around Los Angeles. And he did it on a hot weekend in September, October of 1967. And then you flash forward 30 years, 40 years, and we did it on a hot weekend in March. And so we did 12 iterations of this piece, not in the same spaces as Capro had done them 40 years before. We wanted to, but a lot of those places didn't exist anymore. And for liability reasons, a lot of the places that we wanted to go to couldn't allow us to do it. But when I say part of my job is sourcing 12,000 pounds of ice, there's the ice. And so I had to find ice for all these places. And what was incredibly awesome was being able to look through a book and see in one of the pictures, the ice truck was there from the 67 iteration, and I was like, hey, those guys are still in business. I know that. And for weird reasons that aren't worth going into, I was like, I know the president of that company. And I was like, I called him up, I was like, I need some ice. He's like, yeah, go to the store. And I said, no, I need a lot of ice. And they had a specialty ice guy who usually works with movie productions, and he was assigned to me, and we had a great 3 months together while we were sort of preparing for this piece. And he was just a guy who was the specialty ice guy for Union Ice. He had very little interest in art, and kept saying like, I don't really get Pollock, anything after the Impressionists, I don't really understand. I think it's ugly. I think it's weird. By the end of our time together, I had him at least understanding about Capro, which I think is kind of heady conceptual stuff, and I had taken him down into the museum enough times that he was a little bit on board with Pollock and some of the other heavy hitters. We can go forward. That's me working on the ice. I was a very active participant in all this, and as I said to the students this morning, although I don't know that I want to say this with this picture up because I believe. It was sort of at this moment doing these 12 iterations of this piece that while I had read about Capro and I sort of thought I understood his work up to this point, doing this 12 times, never mind that my arms were bruised because these were 50-pound blocks of ice, and I sort of felt really damaged at the end of the weekend and totally exhausted. It made me understand his work and what he was trying to get across, and it made me really excited about looking at this kind of work, which is now being called social practice a lot. So this sort of maybe not that moment exactly, but it was a very informative moment for me. So we can go forward. And I think, yeah, see. I'll show you a fun little video. Okay, let's see here. Set this all up, and if the, okay. Full screen.
Full screen's on the top.
Full screen, right, there we go, right. Hi.
So this is actually at the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA, where
This
they
is-
remade one of these.
Oh, we started it somehow not in the beginning. It's more fun if we start at the beginning. Well, you can see it in reverse. Okay, this is time lapse of putting one of these things together. You've seen this before, right?
I don't know if I have of this. Let's move this over here so it's up there.
I think this took 3 or 4 hours. I think we started at 5 o'clock and we were done about 8.
And you did it how many times?
We did it in each space. We did it once, so we did it 12 times over the weekend.
Over one weekend?
Yeah, I participated in all but one because Nancy and her friends were doing that one. Well, that's not why, but that's what it looks like when it's done. And then it's a very temporal piece. It's a very ethereal thing. By 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, when I was going back to my car that night, it was almost gone. I mean, because it was such a hot weekend, it had almost melted. So, it's really, while it's quite beautiful, it's really about the interaction between people putting it together. And it was this funny thing. Okay, now we can go back to the slideshow. It was this funny thing because it was all the folks at the museum. Hi. Okay. Working on it together, but it was all the people that really had office jobs and frontline staff jobs. The guys who put exhibitions up on the walls, they were like, yeah, we're good. We do that. We move 50-pound blocks of ice or the equivalent on a daily basis. You guys have fun. And we can't really see them on camera, but there was right at 5 o'clock. They were all just sort of sitting there like, good luck. And it was this interesting thing because it wasn't sort of a blue collar, white collar thing. For us, it was more like, good luck with the spatial relations. You guys who sit at computers all day, we know how things fit into space. And that was a really, and watching all of us people who sit at computers all day trying to, negotiate how things went together and to do it together was a pretty interesting time. So, okay, then I got to do this project called Engagement Party. And I don't know if maybe I should read my list now before I start showing pictures?
Yeah, and maybe talk about how public programming works and how you were in the education department and how this came about. I think that's kind of a nice background.
Right, so like Nancy said, I was in the education department at the museum. I did public programs, as I said to you guys before. My work really was to support the exhibitions that were on view. And at a museum like MoCA, especially a contemporary art museum, everything sort of circles out from the artist in concentric circles. So whatever the artist says is the most important thing, whatever the curator says after that is the next most important thing. And education, we're sort of like 4th or 5th down the line. And it's this funny thing where when an exhibition goes up on the wall, everybody who's been involved in the planning and preparation for the show, they're done with it. And that's when the education department gets it. So they've moved on to the next thing and we're just starting. Which isn't exactly true because I've been doing plenty of planning up to this point too. But it was really this thing where, I wasn't doing traditional education programming. I was doing more public programs, like I said, lectures, all these other things. I really got to understand how the public interacts with artwork, how the public interacts with the museum, and I got this nice opportunity to work on this project that I developed with some of my colleagues called Engagement Party. We got a bunch of money from the Irvine Foundation, which is one of the largest grantors in California. And if you guys stay in California for your work, they will become your friend. So Irvine was giving out money to encourage cultural institutions to become more innovative. Didn't just go to museums, it also went to symphonies, theater companies, you know, the big arts organizations in California. And so we developed this program where we invited, I think the next slide goes into my whole spiel. Yeah, so if you want to read that, that's fine. But basically what it's saying is we would invite emerging, local emerging artist collectives to come and be in residence for 3 months. And we used the term in residence, although that was a very, it was a hard term to use because they weren't living at the museum. They were coming there to work, but we gave them as much access as possible. And they were invited to do 3 event-based artworks on the first Thursday of the 3 months that they were in residence. And they were actually, you know, once we started inviting artists, they could come and be around and ask questions and do stuff and have a lot more access on a regular basis. So, and one of the, I don't know, yeah, and at the bottom here it says, consistent with MoCA's mission statement, Engagement Party aims to identify and support the most significant and challenging art of its time. I was talking to some of the students this morning about institutional critique, and one of the things that we really thought about when we were developing this program is how does a collecting museum deal with performative work like this, deal with work that they can't collect. And, you know, museums are like everybody else. They, well, not everybody else, but museums, you know, think about the value of their collection and, you know, they're doing things, they want to do things that support the value of their collection. Museums also have trustees that are collectors, and so going in there and saying we're going to do this ephemeral work that doesn't have any objects associated with it was a little bit of a radical thing, even for a very progressive contemporary art museum. Okay, now I'll read my weird questions, the weirdest questions I've been asked, and then we'll take a vote on what happens next. Okay, so I was sitting there in Nancy's office trying to think, what are the weirdest things that I've been asked by my job? Because, like I said, I really had to come to an understanding of what my level of risk-taking was when I took on this project. And, you know, what I was willing to say yes to and what I was willing to say no to and why I was saying yes or no. And I mean, while these questions are funny, I also think it's informative because, you know, you guys are all artists of one stripe or another, and you're going to go and perform or do work, and you're going to challenge institutions with whom you're working as you go forward in your career, or you're going to work for the institution that's being challenged. And, or not, I mean, maybe you're not going to do any of that stuff, maybe you're all going to be lawyers, but you know, doing all the sourcing stuff was sort of this grumbly, hard thing, and, you know, luckily I knew where to find 12,000 pounds of ice. But answering these questions, it was sort of, there were the yes-no parts of it, but it was also, there was like the what are my morals and ethics that go with that. So, okay. Okay, one of the questions we were asked was, can we invite the public by art? These are all being asked by the artists that were in residence at one point or another over the 5 years of the program. Okay, can we invite the public to sleep at the museum? Yes. Can we play mini golf in the museum? Well, not in the galleries, but everywhere else. Can we race remote-controlled cars in the museum? Sure, but the track's going to have to be really secure. Can we do interviews with staff on highly sensitive topics and then turn those interviews into scripts? Okay, if the staff agrees. can we do a bike ride around downtown LA under the auspices of the museum and call it Drug Run? Will you talk to the police department for us about it? Yes and yes. Can we shoot fireworks off the, can we shoot fireworks above the museum? Well, no, because it's not that, it's a residential space and I don't think that's cool. Well, if it's zoned for it, can we do it? Sure, if your budget allows for it. Fireworks are really expensive. Can we drive a motorcycle off the roof of the museum? Well, no.
I did not ask that question.
But no, it wasn't Nancy, actually. No, but it wasn't just like, no, you can't. I'll tell you the reasons why. No, because at the one building, the Geffen Contemporary, the roof is completely unstable, and if they got a motorcycle up there, it would fall right through. And at the other building, there was a lip on it, and also once, I don't know if any of you guys been to Mocha, downtown Mocha? So those of you who've been there know that there's like the museum entrance is in a giant hole, and there's giant holes that go down like all over the place there. So there's no safe place to land. So no, you can't drive a motorcycle off of the roof of the museum, even if your friend is a stunner. That's nice. Can we crash two cars together? Well, actually, yes, you can, but we're gonna have to talk to the fire marshal about that. So it meant pushing the cars together rather than driving them together, but we still got to do it. Okay, and then my last question, I'll wait. But in doing all of this stuff, like the flip side of being able to say yes and no was that I had to have this crazy relationship with the public entities around Los Angeles. Like I said, I had to talk to and that drug run piece was the second one we did. I had to talk to LAPD about why a bike ride was called, that was, was going to be called Drug Run was actually an art piece. And I don't deal well sitting talking with men with guns, so that was a really awkward conversation for me to have. And I had a regular relationship with the fire department. The fire marshal had to oversee a lot of these things. The parking permit people, the people that help you close the street, those people. That is a hard thing to do. I would say of all the things I learned to do, one of the hardest. We also had to deal, strangely, with undercover Homeland Security people, the FCC, and the hardest people to deal with were the neighbors that lived around the museum. That, had decided they wanted this hip downtown lifestyle, but they didn't want it to go after 10 o'clock. So, okay, so before, yes?
You have Homeland Security undercover?
So at the time, in late 2008, the Midnight Riders, which was a bike group that existed all over the country, but in New York, Midnight Riders have been clashing a lot with police, and there had been some weird stuff going on. I don't exactly remember what it was, but they, Homeland Security got wind of the fact that we were doing a bike ride called Drug Run, and they were really interested. So they sent a couple of undercover guys. And it's like that thing that they show you in the movies where they all have the funny haircuts and wear the dumb clothes. They totally did that. They were so easy to pick out. And I was like, hi, can I help you? They're like, no, we're just part of this bike ride. I'm like, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So, okay, now we have choices. Do you want to see slides, or do you want to see the Engagement Party Greatest Hits Volume 1 or Engagement Party The Greatest Hits Volume 2? Those are two short videos. They're like 8 minutes, and they're a montage of the work that we did.
Can't we do all of it?
Well, probably not. We can show the pictures and pick one video. How's that? Because the videos, I think everybody's going to want to, well, maybe we'll see. We'll see what we have time for. So let's flip through the pictures quickly. This was the first group that we worked with. So each group had this, because they weren't making object-based work, because they were making performance work, we asked them to create an identity for themselves. So, and part of that was creating the marketing poster. So the first group, finishing school, created this poster. And I got it at the same time as the director of the museum got it. And I mean, I knew what it was coming. I had seen the proof and I was pretty excited about it. And I got a phone call about a half an hour later from the director of the museum after the boxes came open. And he was like, why'd you waste all this money? You know, nobody's going to be able to read this. This is a terrible marketing campaign, blah, 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 blah. And I said, Jeremy, I don't mean to be insulting, but you're not the demographic for this work. And the demographic that this project was aimed at was the sort of just out of art school, or just out of art school group. And they all loved it, and it was easy for them to read. And you put it in a mirror, you can read the whole thing. Is that a question or just stretching? Okay. They did a piece called Find and Joy. This is the same group, finishing school, where they gave everybody, when you got to the museum, you got a Foxhole radio kit. So you got a cardboard box with an earphone, a razor blade, an antenna, a pencil, and a bunch of different kinds of wire, and a wood base, and you were given instructions, and you made these Foxhole radios, and they were difficult to make, but fun. And once you made them, there was 3 transmitters throughout the museum, and Finding Joy was, in World War I and World War II, was the term for making successful radio contact with the outside world, outside of wherever you were at war, and outside of foxholes. And so the artists went around and recorded staff, trustees, museum community about what brought them joy. And it came at a really interesting time because the museum was undergoing some financial problems and possibly closing, and so to record what brought people joy, you know, was sort of this bittersweet moment of, well, you know, if artwork brings all these people joy, why are we closing the museum? Which didn't happen, but anyway, so go forward, please. This is, look, see, people listening to that, the box, green box is the transmitter, and so that's people figuring out how to listen, you know, they took the wires and they, yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Mini golf in the museum. Next. Okay, so the mini golf, once when you came to play mini golf, your golf ball, you had to pay attention to your golf ball because your golf ball was hooked up to an RFID tag that was connected to your phone number. So every time you made a hole, you got a phone call about holes. So sometimes it was about like Swiss cheese, sometimes it was about like gopher holes, like you got these weird recorded phone calls. And you also indicated to the vegan donut hole maker to make another donut. So there were a lot of, there were donuts, and that was fun. The really interesting thing about this piece, although it was incredibly interactive on site, the guy who was helping them with the recordings of holes was in New York. He wasn't local, and a lot of people started calling him back and leaving him messages. So he had this for like 2 weeks after this piece. He had this sort of residue of this piece. Next, please. Can we drive remote control cars in the museum? Yes, we can, as long as there's a good track. This is the remote control car. In the front, there's a camera, because you were driving them from a video game console outside. So it was, so not only was the art community there and interested, the remote control car community got wind of this, and they were all there and very interested as well. This makes it look like the car was going faster than a speeding bullet. They didn't go that fast, but they built the cars with all open source technology, so it was pretty interesting blending of remote control car people and art people and computery things. Next, please. I showed this earlier. This is the diagrammatic soccer pitch for a piece called Trying the Hand of God, which was a piece that involved the 1996 FIFA World Cup quarterfinals between England and Argentina. And there was this controversial play called The Hand of God. Anyway, and we had soccer players there, and the public could put on a jersey and act like Diego Maradona and try to headbutt the thing into the ball into the goal with he used his hand. And it was complete with local Univision sportscaster doing play-by-play. Next, please. See, look, there they are playing soccer. So we had this local soccer semi-pro team came and helped us play. We set up bleachers, made it look as much like a soccer pitch as you can make a museum patio look like. Next. See, more of the soccer. I got interested. Graphically, it's nice. Next.
Crash the cars.
This is where we crash the cars. And actually, this is in one of the videos. What's the next picture? Oh, so this is the folks pushing the cars, and the point of this piece, which was the two cars. They made this collage, this really nice collage, and they had done this. You know how you see cars wrapped in advertisements? They had given them this image and had these two cars wrapped in the same way, and they were trying. The artists have a music-based practice, and they were trying to make people think about hearing things in stereo, but also treble versus bass, which I don't know enough about music to understand exactly what they were doing, but it was pretty cool and it felt really weird. Let's see. So yeah, more they're going back and forth. Let's go. Next picture.
Sorry.
That's okay. This is a group called My Barbarian. They do very flashy song and dance numbers, but these were the ones that went in and interviewed the staff and was asking them all these sensitive questions. Have you ever cried at work? What's your favorite place at work? What's your least favorite place? If the museum didn't exist, would you work at a different museum? Would you still like art? Like all of these questions, because this again was when the museum had just come out of a period of going through financial hardship, and then they turned it into a very glamorous song and dance number. We can go forward. And this is Lucky Dragons, which it's really hard to explain their work, and it's like, this is a nice picture, but it doesn't begin to show all the things that they do. So they, Luke right here, this is Luke, that's Sarah. Luke does a lot of computer programming, and he is really interested in like where the computer meets the really basic technology, and he would do these pieces. The two of them together would create these pieces where, in order for the music to flow, the sound to flow, there had to be everybody had to hold hands because that was the circuit, and different kinds of pieces like that. So what you can't see, and it's kind of the point of the picture, which you can't see, is the audience is all the way around the stage holding hands. And that, as soon as one person lets go, because they have to go to the bathroom or whatever, the sound goes away. It's pretty amazing. Okay, and then this is what I'm doing now. Well, this is not now, but this is a piece that I did in the fall with an artist named Liz Collins, and this is at Occidental College where I'm working now, and just because I'm no longer at the museum, don't think I don't still get asked crazy questions. They're just as crazy. So this, Liz is an artist who has a fashion practice, and she has her own knitwear line, and like 6 or 7 years ago she got really interested in the politics of the fashion world and the politics of making clothes, and she started these pieces where she would do these performances for any number of hours, 8 hours, however long there was light, where several people, you can see the several people up here, would just start going back and forth on a mechanical knit machine. And the one thing Liz wanted you to get out of this was, you know, whenever you put on clothes, and for those of you that are in the fashion area here, you know this, like everything's handmade, even if it's mechanical, even if it's mass produced, it's all made by hand. It's just how involved that hand is and how precious that hand is. And so this was at the end of 8 hours of knitting. This is a guy is up in a cherry picker taking this photo. So this went all the way down the main staircase of the college and into the quad.
So they made this in 8 hours?
Well, there's a little bit of cheating going on, but not much. There was like probably like, I would say this would have been like 12 hours worth of work, but they did it, because they did do a little bit of knitting beforehand, because they wanted to be able to put these things coming down from the tops of the buildings. So just a little bit of cheating though. So, okay, next crazy question before you do that. Last crazy question.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
So that's actually on the ground?
Yes, right. Yes, this is actually on the ground. This is a hard picture to read if you don't know what you're looking at.
Right.
This is the main staircase that goes through the quad on the campus. And and he's in a cherry picker up here, probably about 2 stories up, and looking down on the whole piece. And I can tell it's the end of the day because it's pretty much done, but it's also where the sun is. And it's funny because I know what I'm looking at, and most of the people I've shown this piece to, or shown this picture to, know what they're looking at, and this is the first time I've used it in a slideshow, and I've realized I gotta get better pictures because nobody knows what they're looking at. Or more, like,
It looks like to me a metal sculpture.
Right.
But,
so I need to show the evolution a
so
little bit better.
they planned it was planned how the knitting was going to create the shapes and stuff?
No, during the course of the day, people went in and sewed them together.
Ah, okay.
So that it comes out in these strands.
Right, okay.
And then as they got, sort of further down, people would just start sewing together to make the shapes. As you can see, I like big projects. And I actually like really small and really demure projects too, but I like big projects. So recently, around Christmas time, I was asked, what if we installed a full-scale replica of an MQ-1B Predator drone on campus? How would you feel about that? Could we do that? So, next slide. Do
you want me to forward through and then
we'll go forward. We'll come back to Devin.
Okay.
There it is.
There it is. Oh, crap, sorry.
My
My bad.
Timer gone. So this piece is the reason why I can't spend the night. This airplane arrives tomorrow. This is a model, and we're getting a foam skeleton of an MQ-1B Predator drone, full size, and over the course of the weekend, the artists in the college community will be covering this with mud. So as you can see, I mean, it has that interactive component that I really like, but it also is going to be this fairly ominous thing in front of the school's main theater that's going to sit there for 2 months and hopefully provoke some interesting questions. And now we can go back to Devin.
Okay.
While she's going back,
Yes.
so what is your job at Occidental College?
They've hired me to start an arts initiative on campus that is about presenting. They haven't had a professional gallery program there in over 12 years. They they have good theater, they have good music, but they don't have any kind of uniformed marketing for it. So they want me to create something that looks like a mini UCLA Presents or something like so that the artwork that's coming out of the college is all branded to look, so everybody's getting information about it. The college knows what's going on, the college community knows what's going on, the general population knows what's going on. I've been tasked with a lot of things, but the general sense is to bring the level of visibility and the quality of the arts up at Occidental. And among other things, I get to do fun projects like bring a Predator drone to campus, and I'm responsible for the gallery. So I don't want to run us out of time, and we'll just run through Devin Devin Suno has taught here before in the summer program, I think. So, and his show just closed last Saturday at the gallery. One of the things that I'm able to do with the gallery program there is encourage the artists to take risks as well. Like I said, riding your motorcycle off the side of the roof of the museum, whatever. I mean, that's not risk taking. If you're used to being a painter, go forward, please. This is typical of Devin's work. He probably taught painting here. He probably did a really great job teaching the very formal elements of painting because he's great at that. And these paintings, you can't see it, but they're multi-layered with acrylic and spray paint and everything. And he makes these amazing masks using painter's tape by hand, very complicated. So he had several paintings in the show. I think go forward again. Back one. Okay, back another one. No, all right, go for it. Okay, so and we have 2 rooms in the gallery. So I said to Devin, why don't you think about for the other room doing stuff that doesn't really feel like you, like push yourself. What does that look like? What could that be? And so these 2 pictures sort of represent that. On the left, he made his first sculpture, which was a series of crates that he handmade. So he takes all of these things that look really mechanical and he hand makes them. And he started printmaking last summer, so he's got prints in there for people to do take ones. And then this is wallpaper, which in the next slide we'll see he covered the room in wallpaper that uses the same imagery that he uses in his paintings. And then he also collaborated with the Book Arts program to make these really interesting, beautiful books that use a very sort of, what's the right word, throwaway kind of printing technique called risograph in combination with letterpress. So it's like the very precious and the very, I don't want to say cheap, it's not the right word, but, and it combines them, and the books were really nice. The students and Devin had this really amazing connection. So, go forward, please. This is a painter, making wallpaper out of his paintings, and actually, that's a bit of risk-taking. And I loved it because, the room has a fireplace, and it's a weird room, and it made it nice to have wallpaper in there. Next. Oh, and then we're back to the room. Okay, so now I've gotten to 8:30, and we haven't shown the video. Do you guys want to see a video? Do you want to ask some questions? No.
Tell her, not me.
Wanna
Talk
go
to
home?
Aandrea.
You're allowed to say that, because it's 8:30, and you want to go home.
I want to watch the video.
Okay, so anyways.
Why don't we do Q&A and then
Yeah.
anybody who wants to stay can see the video. How about that? And there's food outside too. So why don't we do a little question and answer, and then if you guys have some food, and then oh wait, how do I do this? I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna try and get it back to your first slide,
Oh, okay.
but.
Yes, hi.
College that I have in
Occidental College, it's in Eagle Rock in Los Angeles
It's very famous for being the college that President Obama went to.
for 2 years. For 2 years, and then he went to Columbia. Did you have a question, or were you just stretching?
Oh, no, sorry, I was
Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
The ice building,
Yes?
did that have a roof?
No.
Okay.
No
I was
roof.
gonna ask how you guys did the roof.
No. Complicated to try to put a roof on it. It's just the 4 walls.
Do you guys have any questions about how does one do this job? How do you get to work for a museum and actually bring artists in? How does that happen? How do you get there? Or
Do you do your own artwork?
I take really good vacation pictures. No, I decided a long time ago that any work that I make, I'm much better at supporting other people and making their own work. And I studied photography and sculpture, but like I said, I take terrific vacation photos at this point. You have a question?
Oh, I was gonna ask this something, but I guess what countries
Well, the second or third slide I showed you, Women's Action Coalition, being involved with that activist group was a real starting point for me. I had done studio art and art history as an undergrad, and when I got to San Francisco, was really interested in sort of trying to, sort of combine my interest in politics with my interest in art. And as I said to this morning's class, I graduated from college at the time of the recession. It was hard to get a job. I worked in social services for 5 years, and it was great because I thought I was going to go off and get an art history PhD. And working in social services and with people for 5 years, it really made me realize that I would be terrible trying to get a PhD, that I just don't have that level of concentration to study one thing for 5 years or 7 years or whatever. So I went to grad school in LA, and again, as I said this morning, I went to grad school thinking as soon as I'm done, I'm going to go back to San Francisco. I was raised in Los Angeles. I lived with my folks while I was in grad school, and I just was like head down, going to school, and I started, when in my spare time I would go see art, and it was when Los Angeles was really, the gallery scene was starting to become very interesting in Los Angeles in the late 90s, and sort of midway through my time in grad school, I sort of did this about face and was like, okay, I want to be here now, so I was able to, because I was living with my folks, financially I was able to take a lot of internships and really explore what I wanted to be doing and take advantage of that. So, and I did. I think I worked for most arts organizations and all of the art government organizations in Southern California. And it was great because, then I could do, now I have a good Rolodex of people to call when I need something.
I'm curious if you have any insight into funding for individual artists, as I'm sure you're well back in the early 90s, like the NEA, and they pulled all the grants for individual artists, and now it's all arts organizations. And I'm just wondering if you think that's going to change at all, or what advice you have for artists to try to get funding for their individual projects.
That is a good question. And my cynical answer is I don't think it's going to change that much because if I'm a private funder and I'm interested in, and I've done a lot of grant writing, and, part of the relationship between the organization and the foundation is the foundation is required to give away a certain amount of its money in order to get the tax breaks, and the organization obviously needs the money in order to function. If I'm the foundation and I'm giving to an individual artist, I don't get that tax break because the artist isn't a 501c3, which is a nonprofit organization. So the cynical answer is from private funding, probably not, although that being said, I have recently been invited to sit on a panel of a foundation that gives away funding to artists at both the emerging and mid-career level. So it's out there. Government is a different story, and I think that given the state of our government organizations, besides for locally, no. I don't think so. I mean, California state government is so messed up. The California Arts Council was basically dissolved 15 years ago, and they've only now started to make comebacks. And I don't think that they will be sophisticated enough in their planning as they regrow to give money to individual artists. NEA, anybody's guess, new person, maybe. Last guy, Rocco, whatever his name was, the poet, jerk. Like, that guy, he had a day job working, he was managed, I'm sure, he didn't raise his own children, I'm sure his wife or somebody else did, so he had plenty of time to do, have his day job at whatever corporation it was, I can't remember, and then go into his study and quietly write poetry all night. Well, goody for him, so he didn't think that was an important thing to do, give money to artists. I don't know, I wish I had a more super positive, like, sure, there's money everywhere. I mean, it doesn't exist everywhere, but I think there are pockets of it, and it's just, a lot of research. I don't know if it'll get better. It couldn't get much worse, so it's probably gonna get better. Somebody over here? No, somebody had a question, but maybe not. Yes, yeah. Hi.
Sorry.
Oh.
Okay, so for the thing with the bike ride and everything, and they called it drug run, I imagine that was pretty simple to figure out who to contact, because, like, obviously the police are going to suspect something if something's called the drug run. But, like, for other things, does it ever get really complicated to figure out who to contact for what? And when it does get complicated, why?
Why does it get complicated? Because, you don't know who the right guy is to call. Like, who do you call to fabricate an MP1B predator drone? Who do you call to get 12,000 pounds of ice? Like, but also in the government stuff, like, one of the pieces we did, which I thought would be pretty straightforward, was going with this artist group that is called the Los Angeles Urban Rangers. We did a walk down to the LA River, but because of where they wanted to go in the LA River, and that had historically been a place that had had a lot of gang activity and a lot of ne'er-do-wells doing drugs and whatnot, like, that was a spot that you really weren't allowed to go to in the river. And they got, like, the organization that's, and it's sort of this quasi-private, quasi-government organization, got wind that we were going to do this, and they went all nuts, and I had to get a permit, and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes they just, like, sometimes the crazy people come to you, and sometimes you have to find them. And not everybody's crazy. I mean, I've had amazing working relationships. Like, the fire marshal that I've had to deal with, no, you can't crash the cars into one another with people driving them, but let's figure out how to make it work. I mean, he had to do his job, but he was very supportive in helping me do mine. Yeah.
Shall we, you guys want to get snacks, and then we'll watch a video if you want to come back in.
It's
How
only
about
10
that?
minutes.
It's only 10 minutes. But let's say thank you to Aandrea before, in case some of you don't come back.